What's going on, y'all? We are back in the garage. I took 2 weeks off, did a family vacation, just got away from things for a while. Now that I've got some downtime, we're going to go ahead and tighten up the suspension on the back side of Gus Gus, and then we'll move to the front side, start tearing that down and getting all the bent parts off there. Let's go ahead and show you torquing down the U-bolts, torquing down the front hanger bolts and the shackle bolts. The U-bolts get torqued to 100 foot-pounds, then the front hanger bolt and the rear shackle bolts will be 120 foot-pounds. That's according to my instructions from Iron Rock Off-Road. So we can get that done. Oh, and I got to tighten down the rear brake lines and the shocks as well. So let's get started. Alright, so in the last video I said you wanted the weight of the vehicle on the suspension, so that way it was at ride height so we could torque everything down. What I did was use my really tall jack stands, measured up to about ride height, and now we'll torque everything down. We're going to start by the U-bolts here, and then we'll go to the passenger side U-bolts. Then what we'll do is we'll torque the passenger side leaf spring, front hanger bolt, and then we'll torque the shackle bolts on the passenger side. Then that way that leaf pack is done. Then we'll come over to the driver's side again and tighten down all the bolts for the leaf springs. Once we're done here, we'll tighten down the shocks, go over the brake lines, make sure all those are snug, and we still have to do the e-brake cables, which is why I have this on stands right now and not putting the tires back on it. The cables are en route from ECGS, which is East Coast Gear Supply, so that way we can hook up our parking brake cables. So let's get this started. So with the U-bolts tightened passenger and driver, now we can tighten down our hangers and our shackles. We're going to start the front hanger bolts on the driver's side, then work our way to the hanger to frame bolts, and then hanger to shackle bolts. Then we'll move over to the passenger side and start the same process. So here's the time lapse. So with the rear suspension now tight, we're going to go ahead and tighten up the brake lines, tighten up the shocks, mount up the vent tube, and the rear suspension will be done, minus e-brake cables until they show up. Start tightening up these two lines. There's still enough play in here I can lift this up, get a grinding wheel in there so Tim can weld a bolt down for it. We got to get the vent line on and then tighten up the lines at the calipers as well. got the brake lines tight. We'll go ahead and cut the old tube off of here, slide the breather tube back in place. Then everything else back here is pretty much done except for the shocks and the e-brake cables, which we'll get to in this video as well. So yeah, let's get started. I got the vent line tightened up, bottom shock nut tightened up, got the upper shock nut tightened up. I got to put the shock on the driver's side. You guys can see it's kind of missing. Haven't made it that far yet. Still pull the e-brake cables. Depending on when my new cables show up, I don't know if we'll get to the front in this video. If my cables show up within the next couple days, we'll show you guys the install of those e-brake cables as well. But we are getting there. Let's pull out that passenger shock and get it mounted up, and then we'll go from there. I can't remember if I said this in the first part of the suspension video, but this is the Iron Rock Trail Tamer shocks. We had the same shock on the last suspension. Sorry guys, of course I'm recording outside and now the wind picks up. Integrated bump stop, 60mm shock body, 18mm shock shaft. I like these shocks. They worked flawless on the last setup that we had. I didn't see the need to spend on Bilsteins. Wasn't in the budget. So we're gonna run these again. You guys already saw the driver's side is on. So let's go ahead and get this passenger side on and then button up the rear suspension. It is the next day. We're getting back out here in the garage. I got distracted last night with dinner, doing some family things. So we got to get that passenger side shock on. Then we got to look at removing what's left of the e-brake cables. And I have to retorque the shackle to leaf spring bolts. I over-tightened them. So we're going to back them off and take them down to 80 foot-pounds instead of, I think I did them at like 100 or 120 yesterday. So we'll fix all that and get going. Well, I guess I didn't notice this when we went to go put the shock in, but when the front drive shaft hit the exhaust pipe, it tweaked the exhaust far enough over to where it is sitting right up against where the shock needs to go. So we're gonna have to cut this off, drop the exhaust pipe, go from there. Well, exhaust is off. Now we can go back to putting our shock in. But having kids, having things going on, this is going to end for today, I think. I don't know if I'll get that shock on today. Getting all this stuff down took a little longer than planned, so we'll see. After putting up a fight, the shock is now in. As I showed you guys earlier, the exhaust is on the ground. I've got to retorque these back bolts on the hanger to leaf spring. Then start working on dropping those e-brake cables. That way when the ECGS parts come in, we're ready to go. The rear e-brake cables, this is what goes inside the sheathing. And then this is what locks it into the park brake adjuster, right there. Now all we have is the sheathing in here. You guys can see it's got a couple little tangs. Now what I've heard about guys doing is putting a wrench over it and then popping them free. Somebody said a 1/2 inch wrench, so we'll try that real quick. Easier to show you on the ground than we'll try to do this. So you slide the 1/2 inch wrench over this side that has the little fingers on it, and then push it through the brake bracket. Fairly straightforward. Alright, so I got the other cable out. We'll go ahead and get the ECGS box open. I'll show you guys those, and then we'll go from there. So here we have our parking brake cables. Short side for the driver's side, long side for the passenger side. These have little rubber grommets as an insulator, and some Jesus clips to hold them in place at the axle, and they just mount stock, like the stock Cherokee style, at the adjuster. So East Coast Gear Supply has made some nice cables. I showed in another video their brake line system. If I would have used their hoses and their hardline as they intended, it would have worked, but I didn't have a way to weld it up, so I ended up making my own hoses and lines, or using different hoses and lines. That wasn't anything on the fitment on them. That's not why I made my own hard lines. I just want to clarify that. So here we have our cable bracket at the axle. You guys can see the rubber grommet, or rubber washer there. The Jesus clip here, and then it connects to the parking brake there. Then we're going to take this, run it under, and connect it to the parking brake system adjuster. So we put the cable up into the bracket. We're going to have to take the slack out of the adjuster, or give the adjuster some slack, right here. Loosen this up so it'll all square up. But I'm just going to go ahead and start on the passenger side. Get that ran over too. Passenger side is in. Route it up and over the axle, and then connect it to the bracket. I'll have to find a way to secure it to the axle so it doesn't slip, fall, or go anywhere. But now we gotta just hook it to the adjuster, and we can throw the tires on this thing. Now that we have the cables ran, we're gonna go ahead and take the adjuster, loosen it up, get the cables attached to the adjuster, and then we can put the tires on this thing, get it back on the dollies, clean the garage back up, and spin the Jeep around one more time. The reason I have to keep turning it around is I'm limited on space in front by the toolbox where I can work on it. So let's go ahead and get these cables attached to the adjusters and go from there. 1/2 inch wrench will fit this nut. Then you want to hold the head of it with a crescent wrench or a pair of channel locks, vice grips, something. I'm using the crescent wrench because I think it'll keep it from getting damaged. So we'll back this nut off here, get the screws mounted up, or get this mounted up, and go from there. While making this adjustment, I quickly realized that the adjuster comes off the park brake cable side, just like it did off the axle side cables. I ended up taking the adjuster off, moving it to the bench, and then loosening it up there, which made my life a lot easier. Well, the adjuster's on. It's currently loose, but we'll tighten all that up when we get fluids in the diffs and get this thing ready to actually go down the road. I just wanted it all mounted up for now. at tire poke, I can tell how much the 8.8 is narrower than the factory Jeep axle. A lot of folks online said I wasn't going to know a difference. Inch inward is definitely noticeable. We're going to run some chromoly shafts, C-clip and eliminators. That should push the axles out an inch and add some much needed strength back here. Stock diff cover is going to get tossed in favor of something heavier duty. I haven't figured out which brand I want to run yet, but that'll all be done before you even put fluid in it. But damn, was it nice to see this thing back on some fresh suspension. Iron Rock makes some killer leaf springs, some great products. Their people were a big help getting this stuff ordered. So now we'll have to start on the next part of this. Well, y'all, we're going to end the video here. Looking back at it, I think this took long enough. We've got a couple days in and out here, and I know my videos are kind of choppy, but it's only because I work on it when I have time. So we get segments here and there. I do appreciate y'all watching. If you guys like these videos, click the like button, hit the subscribe button. I appreciate y'all watching. God bless. Take care.